My 10-year-old son asked if getting 100% was failing. So I came home early and found his tutor Trevor sitting in my recliner drinking from my mug while my wife served him coffee, and they discussed their plan to divorce me and convert my house into Trevor's academy, after making my son write "I'm stupid" 20 times for getting a 95%. The day my 10-year-old son asked if getting 100% was failing is burned into my memory. I knew his school offered extra credit questions that could bump you over 100%, but he was genuinely scared I'd be angry. It threw me off. But hey, kids stress about grades, right? Then he started doing homework until midnight. Every night, my wife just laughed it off. He's finally caring about school, she said, but then I noticed other things. He'd erase entire pages if his handwriting wasn't perfect, started chewing his fingernails until there was nothing left to bite, stopped playing basketball after school. He never rejected a game of ball, but when I asked, he said he didn't have time for dumb games anymore. I tried to believe my wife was right, but one evening, I caught him crying over a math worksheet, whispering, "Stupid, stupid, stupid," and I couldn't help but think this wasn't just about grades. It got worse when the next morning, he threw up before school all because he had a spelling test. When I told my wife I was worried about our son, she just brushed it off, but I couldn't do the same. Kids don't just develop test anxiety this severe overnight without reason. So I started coming home early from work without telling anyone. Tuesday, I saw a Prius in our driveway. Wednesday, I heard my son saying, I'm sorry," over and over. Thursday, I watched through the kitchen window. That's when I saw him. Trevor, the tutor from my wife's mommy Facebook group. Everyone swore by him. I watched as my son showed him a test with a score of 95%. Trevor shook his head, pointed at each missed question, then made my son write out what he did wrong 20 times each. Kept saying things like, "Is this the best you can do? Really?" My wife sat there nodding like this was completely normal. Even added, "Trevor is right. You knew this material." The next day, I pretended to leave for work, but circled back. I crept up to the living room window. Trevor was sitting in my chair, my father's old recliner, with his feet up on my ottoman. My wife brought him coffee and my favorite mug. "Once we get him into the gifted program, we can start phase 2, Trevor said, putting his hand on her thigh. "What about his father?" my wife asked. "He thinks I'm pushing too hard." By the time the divorce goes through, the boy will already see me as his real father figure, the one who actually cares about his success. Kids gravitate towards strength, not weakness. He sipped from my mug. "Besides, this house will be perfect for my home academy. We'll convert his man cave into a study center." I wanted to burst in right then and there, but I needed more evidence. I started recording everything on my phone from outside. That evening, I found my son recopying his entire essay because he'd crossed out one word. When I said it looked fine, he panicked. Trevor says messy work shows a messy mind. He'll make me do extra problems. That's when it hit me. I asked him gently, "What happens when you get things wrong with Trevor?" His face went pale. He doesn't yell, he just looks disappointed. Says things like, "I guess not everyone can be exceptional." Makes me explain why I'm too stupid to get it right. Says maybe I'm just not gifted program material. Maybe I'm just average. My blood ran cold. This man had been emotionally manipulating my child while I worked 60-hour weeks to support our family, and my wife just let him. "What else does Trevor say?" I asked. "He says A's are for failures. He says if I don't want to end up homeless, then I'd get at least 105% every time. He told Mom, if I don't get into this boarding school, I'll probably end up," he paused, "like you. But I think you're awesome, Daddy." I was seeing red, but I kept my voice calm. "Son, C's get degrees. B's are great. Hell, A's with a nervous breakdown aren't worth it." He started crying harder. "But Trevor says that's loser talk, and Mommy also thinks you're a loser." I stormed downstairs and confronted my wife. She was highlighting workbooks and quickly closed them when she saw me. "We need to talk about Trevor," I said. Her face went white. "What about him? He's giving our kid an anxiety disorder. He threw up before a spelling test." My jaw dropped at the excuses she started giving me. She said that Trevor's students all tested into gifted programs, and our son needed this if he wanted to live a great life. She said competition was fierce these days, and he was just preparing him for the future. My jaw clenched when she claimed I was overreacting simply because I couldn't amount to anything in life because I wasn't a good student. But I'd already made my decision. I told her Trevor was banned from our house effective immediately. She exploded like I'd never seen before. She screamed about how I was sabotaging our son's education, how Trevor was the only reason he was improving, how I wanted to raise a mediocre child. That's when she slipped and revealed everything. She shoved her phone in my face, showing me a curriculum and said, "At least Trevor is willing to do whatever it takes to secure our son's future. He's already planning the curriculum for next year." When she caught herself. I grabbed her phone before she could stop me and started snooping while she tried to yank my arm and get it back. But nothing was stopping me from seeing all their messages. Months of them. Hearts and emojis. Planning their future together. Trevor saying he couldn't wait to mold the boy properly once I was out of the picture. Her complaining about my mediocre ambitions. Him promising to turn his son into champions. Pictures of houses near his proposed academy. Her asking if he'd adopt my son officially. I locked myself in the bathroom with her phone, scrolling frantically through their messages while she pounded on the door. My hands shook as I took screenshots of everything. Messages about our future family. Trevor calling my son our boy. Plans to convert my home into some twisted educational boot camp. My wife begging me to open the door, claiming she needed her anxiety medication from the medicine cabinet. I tried emailing the screenshots to myself, but the message wouldn't send. The Wi-Fi password had been changed. I checked the provider app on her phone and saw she'd already updated it remotely an hour ago. She'd been planning this. My son appeared in the hallway, tears streaming down his face. He clutched his math workbook, sobbing about tomorrow's test. My heart tore in two. I needed to confront my wife, but my son needed me more. I slipped her phone under the door and rushed to him, leading him back to his room while she scrambled to retrieve it from the bathroom. I sat on his bed, helping him work through practice problems while listening to my wife's footsteps downstairs. She was deleting those messages, but she didn't know about my screenshots. Through his bedroom door, I heard her on the phone, her voice carrying up the stairs. She was crafting a narrative about my paranoia and erratic behavior, suggesting I needed to see her therapist friend. The next morning felt like walking through a minefield. My wife served breakfast with a bright smile, sliding extra worksheets across to our son. "From Trevor," she announced. "He made these specially for you." Our son's shoulders slumped, but he picked up his pencil without complaint. I escaped to my car and immediately called my lawyer. The call wouldn't go through. I checked our bank app and discovered why. Our joint credit cards were maxed out with charges to Trevor's tutoring company. Thousands of dollars I didn't authorize. My lawyer would have to wait. At work, I barely made it to my desk before HR called me in. My wife had contacted them about my erratic behavior at home. She'd requested information about our employee assistance program, claiming she was worried about my mental state affecting our son. They handed me pamphlets about stress management and work-life balance. My phone rang during the meeting. The school counselor needed to see both parents immediately about our son's anxiety issues. She suggested Trevor attend as educational support. I raced to the school, but my wife and Trevor were already there when I arrived. They sat close together in the counselor's office, presenting a united front about how my work stress was affecting our son. The counselor took notes as they spoke, documenting every word. According to them, I was hostile to academic excellence, undermining our son's potential. Trevor produced charts showing great improvement since he'd started tutoring. My wife dabbed at her eyes, talking about how hard she'd tried to support our son's education, despite my resistance. The counselor's notes would become official record, I realized. The narrative was already being written. Our son sat between them, small and quiet. When asked about his feelings, he broke down completely, but his words were twisted. "Daddy gets angry about homework" became "Father creates hostile environment around learning." His tears about test anxiety became evidence of my negative influence. The next week brought an avalanche of discoveries. At our son's pediatrician appointment, I noticed the forms. My wife had listed Trevor as stepfather and checked the box for remarried. When I confronted the receptionist, she looked confused. "Your wife updated this last month. She said you were separated." I called my sister for support. She listened at first, even offered to help. Then my wife called her, mentioning my similar breakdown when our father died years ago. "Remember how he got then?" My wife said, "I'm just worried history is repeating itself." My sister's support evaporated. "Maybe you should take some time to get yourself together," she suggested. The basketball coach pulled me aside at pickup. "Hey, just wanted to check. Your son says he can't play anymore because you want him focusing only on grades?" I stared at him in shock. "Well, Trevor's sitting in Dad's recliner drinking from his favorite mug while planning to steal his family. Talk about making yourself at home before you've even moved in yet." My wife had been telling everyone I was the one pushing academic pressure. When I tried to refinance our mortgage to free up some cash for a lawyer, I discovered I needed both signatures. My wife refused, telling the loan officer I was trying to commit financial abuse by taking money without her consent, another official record of my concerning behavior. Our son's teacher emailed about concerning comments he'd made in class. Apparently, he told her that Daddy says grades don't matter. Taken out of context, it sounded like I was sabotaging his education. The truth, that I'd been trying to ease his anxiety, was lost in translation. I found our family tracking app had been modified. Notifications were silenced, but the location history showed my wife had been tracking my movements for weeks. Those safety concerns she'd mentioned last month were just cover for surveillance. My best friend Dave had always been my rock. But after my wife called his wife about my obsessive behavior and paranoid delusions, he pulled back too. "I can't have you around my kids right now," he said. "Not until you get some help." The neighborhood had turned into a minefield. Parents whispered at the bus stop after my wife posted in our community Facebook group about getting help for a struggling spouse. She'd tagged local mental health resources and crisis hotlines. Comments poured in with hearts and prayer emojis. Trevor started showing up everywhere. At my gym, making small talk about helping through this difficult time. At the grocery store, coincidentally shopping in the same aisles. Always friendly, always helpful, always watching. Even my own mother turned against me. My wife brought our son over and he cried about daddy scaring him with yelling. My mother, who'd raised 3 boys and never batted an eye at raised voices, suddenly acted like I was dangerous. "Your son needs stability," she said. "Not whatever this is." I tried recording Trevor at pickup, hoping to catch him saying something incriminating, but he spotted my phone immediately and loudly offered co-parenting resources and meditation techniques for blended families. To any witnesses, he looked like a saint trying to help a difficult situation. A small victory came when I proved Trevor had lied about his credentials. His teaching certificate was from an unaccredited online program. But that triumph crumbled when I discovered I'd recently been demoted at work for performance issues. My distraction over the situation at home had been documented as inability to focus on job responsibilities. Everything culminated when my wife filed for emergency temporary custody. The filing cited mental instability and aggression, using the counselor's notes, the teacher's emails, and statements from neighbors as evidence. According to the document, I was a danger to our son's well-being and educational development. I sat in my car outside what used to be my home, watching Trevor's Prius in my driveway. Through the window, I could see him in my chair, drinking from my mug, living my life. My son was at the kitchen table, hunched over homework, while my wife and Trevor stood close together, monitoring his work. The screenshots on my phone felt worthless against the wall of documentation they'd built. Every institution that should have protected my family had been turned into a weapon against me. And somewhere in that house, my son was learning that love meant never being good enough, that father figures were interchangeable, and that 100% was just another way to fail. I discovered Trevor had been dating my coworker Lisa for weeks. She mentioned it casually during lunch break, showing me photos from their dinner date. My stomach dropped when she described how he'd quoted passages from my son's favorite book series during their first meeting. The manipulation ran deeper than I'd imagined. Lisa provided updates about my work performance to Trevor without realizing the connection. She thought she was helping her new boyfriend understand workplace dynamics. Trevor used this information to time his appearances at my office building, always managing to run into important clients or supervisors. My wife and I ended up at the police station after a heated argument in our driveway. Neighbors called about the disturbance. We both passed breathalyzer tests and gave conflicting accounts of the same incident. The officers documented everything, creating another official record that painted me as unstable. The custody filing included my own text messages from months earlier, praising Trevor's initial tutoring success. I'd written enthusiastically about how my son's grades had improved, calling it the best thing that happened to his education. Those words now served as evidence against me. During a supervised visit at the courthouse, my son looked at the mediator and explained that I didn't want him to be smart. The weeks of conditioning had taken hold. He genuinely believed he was helping by repeating Trevor's narrative. His innocent face broke my heart as he recited the lies. My wife had installed nanny cameras throughout our house months ago. The footage showed me raising my voice during arguments, but conveniently missed her provocations beforehand. She'd learned to position herself perfectly, ensuring the cameras captured only my reactions. Family court treated the push for academic excellence as positive parenting. My objections to excessive homework and anxiety-inducing pressure were documented as anti-education attitudes. The system couldn't distinguish between healthy achievement and emotional abuse disguised as tutoring. I checked our old shared tablet for Amazon orders, hoping to find evidence. The browser history revealed child anxiety workbooks shipped to Trevor's address weeks before the Wi-Fi password change. The timeline proved they'd been planning this systematic destruction of my credibility for months. Trevor's LinkedIn profile showed connections to several influential people, including the judge's wife, through an education nonprofit. The web of relationships explained why certain decisions seemed predetermined. He'd positioned himself strategically within our community's power structure. My therapist received a subpoena for our session notes. I discussed anger about discovering the affair, which was now being twisted into evidence of violent tendencies. Confidential conversations about betrayal became ammunition in their campaign. I attempted another recording during a custody exchange, but Trevor insisted on meeting at his church for neutral ground. Recording was prohibited inside the building. He'd calculated every move to prevent documentation of his behavior while maintaining his helpful facade. Soccer practice became another battleground when my wife registered Trevor as an authorized guardian at the recreation center. I arrived to pick up my son, only to find Trevor already there, chatting with other parents about child development theories. My boss called me in for a serious conversation. My wife had contacted him expressing concerns about my mental state. He suggested I take extended leave to get myself together. The company valued stability, and my situation was creating unwanted drama in the workplace. Trevor had redecorated my son's room while I was barred from the house. Academic achievement posters covered the walls where sports heroes once hung. I discovered my son's basketball trophies boxed up in the garage during a brief supervised visit to collect belongings. My wife offered supervised visitation if I admitted to emotional instability in writing. The document she presented included language about anger management issues and acknowledged that my behavior was harmful to our son's development. Signing would guarantee limited access but destroy any custody case. My refusal to sign led to accusations that I didn't really want to see my son. The custody filing now included statements about my unwillingness to accept reasonable visitation terms. Every decision became a trap with no good options. I discovered my digital calendar had been edited retroactively. Meeting dates were changed to make my timeline of events seem impossible. Screenshots I'd taken months ago no longer matched the current calendar data. The gaslighting extended backwards through time. My son had been journaling his fears in Minecraft world descriptions. He'd built elaborate structures with signs explaining his feelings, thinking adults wouldn't look there. The entries revealed a child struggling with impossible expectations and fear of disappointing everyone. Reading deeper, I found entries showing my son had initially been struggling in school. Trevor's tutoring had genuinely helped at first before morphing into psychological manipulation. The truth was more complex than pure villainy from the start. My brother faced an impossible choice between believing me and maintaining a relationship with his nephew. He couldn't pick sides without losing someone he loved. The family fracture widened with each passing day. Privately, my brother slipped me contact information for a different lawyer. He couldn't openly support me but wanted to help. The new attorney specialized in custody cases involving psychological manipulation and had seen similar patterns before. I created a fake Facebook profile to infiltrate my wife's mommy group. The conversations revealed Trevor's influence spreading through multiple families. Parents discussed his revolutionary methods and impressive results, unaware of the psychological cost. A chance encounter at the grocery store led to valuable information. A school board member mentioned Trevor's issues at his previous district. Public records requests might reveal a pattern of behavior that courts would have to acknowledge. My son's gaming account contained messages to online friends describing Trevor's punishments. He'd reached out for help in the only way he knew how, telling strangers about being forced to stand in corners holding textbooks for getting problems wrong. The crushing weight of this father's isolation hits like a physical blow to the chest. Every single person who should protect him, his mother, his best friend Dave, even his own workplace, they've all been turned into weapons against him. My wife's estranged sister suddenly emerged, wanting a relationship with her nephew. Her agenda remained unclear, but she demanded immediate access and threatened to complicate custody proceedings if ignored. Another variable in an already chaotic equation. Managing the sister's demands caused me to miss my son's therapy appointment. The therapist marked me as non-compliant with treatment recommendations. Every attempt to juggle competing crises created new evidence of my supposed instability. Credit cards maxed out on legal fees while my wife used our accumulated airline miles for a vacation with Trevor. Social media posts showed them at educational conferences, networking with other academic achievement advocates. They built their future using resources I'd helped accumulate. A confrontation at a pizza restaurant traumatized teenage employees. My son hid in the bathroom calling his grandmother for help while Trevor and I argued about pickup arrangements. Police arrived to find a sobbing child and two angry adults. My employer mandated unpaid leave due to the ongoing legal situation affecting workplace productivity. Investigation revealed Trevor had connections on the company board through his education nonprofit. The network of influence extended into every aspect of my life. Sleeping in my car became routine. I parked outside my former home, watching Trevor's Prius in the driveway. Through windows I'd once cleaned, I saw him living my life, sitting in my chair, teaching my son. My mother begged me to stop torturing everyone and accept the situation. She believed stability mattered more than truth. Her words cut deep as she chose peace over justice, grandson over son. My investigation caused my son's best friend's family to withdraw from school. They couldn't handle the drama surrounding our situation. The parents fought about involvement, straining their own marriage. My fight for truth created collateral damage. Despite knowing I was isolating my son from peers, I continued pushing forward. Each revelation came at a cost measured in childhood friendships and family connections. The price of truth kept rising. My lawyer asked difficult questions during strategy meetings. What if the judge saw me as the problem? She couldn't guarantee otherwise given the mountain of documentation. The system favored stability over disruption, even when disruption meant exposing abuse. Admitting in court to creating fake social media profiles damaged my credibility further. Every investigative step I'd taken looked like stalking through the legal lens. Truth-seeking became harassment in their narrative. Evidence surfaced of my own frustrated texts about my son's grades before Trevor arrived. I'd vented about homework struggles and academic performance to friends. Those messages now painted me as hypocritically opposing the very excellence I'd once desired. My wife's attorney filed an emergency motion after I approached my son during recess. Desperation had led to mistakes. The school security footage showed me calling to him through the fence, violating supervision orders. Trevor genuinely believed he was saving my son from mediocrity. His own childhood poverty had created an obsession with academic achievement as salvation. In his mind, destroying me was necessary to rescue my son from my influence. I used my son's friend to pass messages, breaking court communication rules. The child delivered my note saying I loved him and missed him. When discovered, this became evidence of manipulating minors to circumvent legal boundaries. Matching Trevor's tactics required becoming calculating and deceptive. I studied his patterns, anticipated his moves, and planted seeds of doubt where possible. The fight transformed me into someone I barely recognized. Public record searches revealed a domestic violence filing by T. Morrison against T. Deb Blackwood. Trevor had changed his name after leaving his previous district. The pattern of behavior extended beyond academic manipulation into darker territory. Small victories felt hollow when my son flinched away during supervised visits. He'd been told I was sick, that my opposition to achievement meant I didn't love him enough. The psychological programming ran deep. My wife's counterclaim gained traction as she documented my harassment of Trevor. Following him to gather evidence looked like stalking. Investigating his background seemed like obsession. Truth and paranoia became indistinguishable in court documents. Everything hinged on the guardian ad litem's recommendation. This court-appointed advocate would determine my son's best interests. Their investigation would weigh stability against allegations of emotional abuse. My son's art teacher mentioned he'd drawn pictures of me as a monster. Trevor had helped him understand his father's sickness, she explained. The images showed a small boy standing between a demon and an angel, labeled Daddy and Trevor, respectively. Former colleagues avoided me at professional conferences. Association with my drama threatened their own reputations. The isolation extended beyond family into every professional relationship I'd built over years. The guardian ad litem focused primarily on the stable home environment my wife provided. Without physical harm documented, emotional manipulation remained difficult to prove. The system struggled to recognize abuse that left no visible bruises. Contacting my wife's college roommate revealed unexpected insights. She owed me a favor from years ago when I'd helped her through a crisis. She mentioned my wife finding peace in campus ministry before meeting Trevor, describing someone very different from the woman orchestrating my destruction. The roommate provided context about my wife's father's extreme academic pressure during her childhood. She'd sworn never to repeat those patterns with her own children. The irony wasn't lost on me, but she refused to testify about these conversations. Understanding my wife's transformation didn't excuse her actions, but explained her vulnerability. Trevor had triggered her deepest fears about raising an unsuccessful child. He'd weaponized her childhood trauma against our family. Gaming messages led to discovering detailed journal entries in the Minecraft world my son had shared with me before the conflict. He'd built a memorial to happier times, complete with descriptions of basketball games and family dinners. The journal showed my son knew something was wrong, but blamed himself for the family's destruction. He'd tried protecting me by hiding Trevor's worst behavior, not wanting to make Daddy sad. The weight of that revelation crushed me. I committed to exposing the truth without further traumatizing my son. Every move had to balance justice with his well-being. The fight wasn't just about winning anymore, but about minimizing damage to an already wounded child. Trevor's education nonprofit registration showed fraudulent credentials. State filings contained false degrees and manufactured qualifications. The pattern of deception extended beyond our family into systematic fraud. I presented evidence calmly to the guardian ad litem without emotional displays, just facts, documentation, and patterns. The measured approach contrasted with their portrayal of me as unstable and aggressive. The pattern of Trevor's manipulation became undeniable when laid out chronologically. Text messages, calendar entries, and witness statements created a timeline of escalating control. The guardian ad litem took careful notes. All parties prepared for the final custody hearing. Lawyers strategized, witnesses lined up, and evidence organized. The battle for my son's future would culminate in a judge's decision based on competing narratives of truth. The courtroom was packed with community members forced to choose sides through their seating arrangements. My son's teacher sat in the middle row, carefully uncommitted. I noticed my wife unconsciously mirroring Trevor's gestures as they sat at their table, her hands folding exactly as his did, her head tilting at the same angle when listening to their attorney. The truth emerged through methodical presentation of journal entries and timeline documentation. My new lawyer had organized everything chronologically, showing the escalation from helpful tutoring to systematic manipulation. Each piece of evidence built upon the last, creating an undeniable pattern. During a recess, my lawyer received a call. T. Morrison from the court records had agreed to provide an affidavit about Trevor's pattern after we'd reached out. She wanted to protect other children from experiencing what her family had endured. Her statement would arrive before closing arguments. The judge ordered psychological evaluations for all parties, including my son. The court-appointed psychologist would assess the family dynamics and provide recommendations. This development meant more waiting, more uncertainty, but also hope that a professional might see through the manipulation. Digital forensics authenticated the Minecraft journal timestamps. The expert witness explained how the entries couldn't have been backdated or fabricated. My son's own words, hidden in his virtual world, became admissible evidence. The judge leaned forward, studying the printouts of his desperate messages to online friends. The evidence showed a clear grooming pattern, but also revealed my wife's genuine belief she was helping our son. She'd been both victim and perpetrator, manipulated by Trevor while enabling his abuse. The complexity of her role became apparent as testimony continued. Trevor's breakdown on the stand revealed his messianic complex about saving underachieving children. Under cross-examination, his calm facade cracked. He ranted about lazy parents creating mediocre futures, about his mission to rescue brilliant minds from average families. The courtroom watched his carefully constructed image crumble. The judge offered me joint custody if I agreed to co-parenting therapy with my wife. Let me get philosophical here. Sometimes the hardest truths hide behind good intentions gone wrong. Trevor's breakdown shows how people can twist noble ideas into harmful actions when they let their own past pain control them. The arrangement would require us to work together, despite everything that had happened. I accepted the difficult terms to maintain my son's stability. He needed both parents, even if we couldn't be together. Trevor was banned from any contact with my son, and his education credentials were revoked pending fraud investigation. The state education board launched a review of his nonprofit's practices. Other families began coming forward with similar experiences. The community divided between those who'd seen warning signs and those who'd enabled the situation. The school board implemented new policies for private tutor verification. Parents who'd recommended Trevor faced uncomfortable questions about what they'd witnessed and ignored. I began rebuilding my relationship with my son through patience and basketball. We started with simple games of horse in the driveway. No pressure, no scores that mattered. I told him repeatedly that missing shots was part of learning. That effort mattered more than perfection. The therapeutic custody arrangement included strict monitoring of academic pressure from both parents. A family therapist would oversee our son's educational environment, ensuring neither extreme took hold. We had to submit monthly reports about homework time, extracurricular balance, and signs of anxiety. My wife slowly began recognizing how Trevor had exploited her childhood trauma. During our mandated co-parenting sessions, she revealed more about her father's brutal academic demands. Trevor had identified her vulnerability and weaponized it against our family. 6 months after the custody hearing, I watched my son play in his first basketball game since everything started. He missed more shots than he made, but he was smiling. The joy on his face when he finally scored made every legal battle worthwhile. My wife attended the game, sitting several rows away as our agreement required. I caught her smiling when our son made a particularly enthusiastic attempt at a three-pointer that didn't even reach the rim. Progress came in small moments like these. Trevor faced fraud charges in another state, where he'd attempted to establish a new tutoring center. The investigation revealed a pattern of targeting vulnerable families, particularly those with high-achieving mothers who'd experienced academic pressure in their own childhoods. His sophisticated approach had fooled dozens of families. My relationship with my mother remained strained but improving. She'd apologized for not believing me initially, admitting she'd been swayed by the narrative my wife and Trevor had crafted. Trust would take time to rebuild, but she was trying. Dave reached out after Trevor's fraud charges became public. He expressed regret about withdrawing support when I'd needed it most. I understood his position. He'd been protecting his own family based on the information available. We grabbed coffee occasionally now, slowly repairing our friendship. The financial damage took years to resolve. Between maxed credit cards, legal fees, and unpaid leave, I'd accumulated significant debt. I worked overtime when possible, slowly chipping away at the balance. My son didn't need expensive tutors or elite programs. He needed a father who showed up. My employer welcomed me back full-time once the legal situation stabilized. My supervisor acknowledged the difficult position I'd been in and worked with me to rebuild my professional reputation. The experience had taught them to verify accusations before taking action. Lisa apologized profusely for inadvertently providing Trevor with information. She'd been genuinely deceived, believing she was dating a dedicated educator. Her testimony about his manipulation tactics had helped establish his pattern of targeting people close to his victims. My son's anxiety gradually decreased with proper therapeutic support. He still struggled with perfectionism, but learned coping strategies. We celebrated B's and even the occasional C, focusing on effort and growth rather than numerical grades. The school implemented new protocols for identifying signs of academic abuse. Teachers received training on distinguishing between healthy motivation and harmful pressure. My son's experience had revealed gaps in their child protection awareness. My wife and I developed a functional co-parenting relationship. Though we'd never be friends, we communicated through a court-approved app, keeping discussions focused on our son's needs. The marriage was over, but our responsibilities as parents continued. During a recent parent-teacher conference, our son's teacher commented on his improved emotional state. He participated more in class, took healthy risks with assignments, and showed resilience when facing challenges. The contrast to his previous anxiety was remarkable. I returned to coaching youth basketball, finding purpose in teaching kids that sports should be fun. Several parents thanked me for emphasizing enjoyment over competition. Word had spread about our story, making some families reconsider their own academic pressure. My son recently asked if he could try out for the school play. When I expressed surprise at this new interest, he said he wanted to try something where there weren't right or wrong answers. I signed the permission slip immediately, grateful he felt safe exploring new interests. The house felt different now, lighter somehow. I'd reclaimed my father's recliner and restored the space Trevor had tried to colonize. My son's room displayed a mix of academic achievements and sports posters, reflecting balanced interests. We established new traditions that had nothing to do with grades. Pizza nights where we discussed anything except school. Weekend hikes where the only goal was reaching the summit together. Board game tournaments where creative cheating was encouraged and laughed about. My brother became a crucial support system once the truth emerged. He helped me move back into the house after the custody arrangement was finalized. His quiet presence during the transition meant everything. Family relationships could survive even the deepest fractures. The guardian ad litem's final report had validated my concerns while acknowledging the complex dynamics at play. Their recommendation for therapeutic intervention rather than sole custody had probably saved my son from further trauma. The system had ultimately worked, albeit slowly and imperfectly. Some neighbors remained distant, unable to reconcile their previous judgments with the revealed truth. Others quietly apologized for believing the narrative about my instability. The community's reaction reminded me that public opinion shifts slowly and incompletely. My son's best friend eventually returned to school. The families had worked through their own issues and decided the friendship was worth preserving. Watching the boys reconnect reminded me that children's resilience often exceeds our expectations. During a recent basketball practice, my son attempted a complicated move he'd seen on TV. When he tripped over his own feet instead, he laughed and tried again. That moment, choosing persistence over perfection, showed me healing was possible. The divorce finalized quietly, without additional drama. We divided assets equitably, both accepting responsibility for our roles in the marriage's destruction. The paperwork felt anticlimactic after everything we'd endured. I kept the screenshots that had started everything, stored safely in case they were ever needed again. They served as a reminder to trust my instincts when something felt wrong. Parental intuition had saved my son from years of escalating abuse. My son recently brought home a test with an 87%. He showed it to me with pride, pointing out the problems he'd found challenging but worked through. I stuck it on the refrigerator with a magnet, right next to his basketball schedule. The bedtime anxiety had faded. He no longer stayed up past midnight perfecting homework. Sometimes he even forgot assignments entirely, a normal childhood occurrence that would have triggered panic before. We handled these moments with natural consequences rather than crisis. Trevor's educational theories had contained kernels of truth wrapped in toxic extremism. My son was capable of academic excellence, but not at the cost of his mental health. We found balance between encouraging his potential and preserving his childhood. The last supervised therapy session concluded with the therapist's assessment that our family had stabilized. We'd continue individual counseling as needed, but the crisis had passed. The formal oversight was ending, though the informal work of healing would continue. I watched my son shoot baskets in the driveway, missing more than he made but trying new techniques with each attempt. He'd asked if I wanted to play, but seemed content when I chose to just watch. Sometimes presence mattered more than participation. My wife texted about schedule changes for next week, a normal co-parenting communication without hidden agendas or manipulation. We learned to function as divorced parents, prioritizing our son's needs over our own conflicts. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. The Prius no longer appeared in our neighborhood. Trevor had moved on to another state, another group of vulnerable families, but his pattern was documented now, his methods exposed. Other communities would be warned. As evening approached, my son came inside, sweaty and happy from playing. He grabbed a snack without worrying about dinner timing affecting his homework performance. Small freedoms like these marked our progress. Tomorrow, he had a math test. He'd studied reasonably, understood most concepts, and would do his best. If he got a 75% or a 95%, we'd respond the same way, with interest in what he'd learned, not fixation on the number. The house felt like home again. My son's laughter echoed through rooms that had witnessed too much conflict. We'd survived the worst and emerged different, but intact. The anxiety that had once defined our daily existence had faded to occasional whispers, manageable and normal. I helped him with his homework when asked, stepping back when he wanted to work independently. The balance felt natural now, responsive to his needs rather than driven by external pressure. We learned to recognize the difference between support and suffocation. 6 months later, watching him play basketball with genuine joy, I realized we'd found our way back, not to where we'd started, that innocence was lost forever, but to something real and sustainable, built on truth rather than performance. My son was learning to be himself again, imperfect and wonderful, shooting for the stars but laughing when he missed. Subscribe for more content. This honestly was a very powerful story about breaking free from the trap of endless achievement. Thanks for reading this story with me, it really touched my heart.